The information that I'm about to present here is frightening. There's really no way around that. However, I request that you do your very best to maintain a calm state of mind. Right now in West Africa, the worst Ebola outbreak in history is in full swing and is jumping across borders at an alarming rate. Already, it has spread to 4 countries: Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and now Nigeria. This latest jump into Nigeria is particularly serious since the infected individual carried the virus by plane into Lagos, Nigeria, a city with a population of over 21 million. Doctors Without Borders has referred to the outbreak as, quote, out of control. To make matters worse, there's something very, very important that the corporate media and public health officials aren't telling you regarding this crisis. You'll notice if you read virtually any mainstream article on the topic that they make a point of insisting that Ebola is only transferred through physical contact with bodily fluids. This is not true at all. A study conducted in 2012 showed that Ebola was able to travel between pigs and monkeys that were in separate cages that were never placed in direct contact. Though the method of transmission in the study was not officially determined, one of the scientists involved, Dr. Gary Kobinger from the National Microbiology Laboratory at the Public Health Agency of Canada, told BBC News that he believed the infection was spread through large droplets that were suspended in the air. Quote, "What we suspect is happening is that large droplets, they can stay in the air, but not long, they don't go far, but they can be absorbed in the airway, and this is how the infection starts. And this is what we think because we saw a lot of evidence in the lungs of the non-human primates that the virus got in that way." End quote. Translation: Ebola is an airborne virus. Now, I'm not going to speculate as to whether these so-called journalists and public health officials who keep repeating the official line regarding the means of transmission are lying or are just participating in some massive display of synchronized incompetence. But what I will say is that this shoddy reporting is most likely getting people killed right now, and may in fact be putting all of humanity in danger. How so? Well, think about it for a second. By convincing people that the virus cannot travel through the air, important precautions that could reduce the spread of the virus are not being taken. For example, the other passengers on the plane that traveled to Lagos, Nigeria were not quarantined. To put this into context, Ebola kills between 50 and 90% of its victims. So the stakes are very, very high here. This particular strain of Ebola is not Ebola Zaire. This is a new strain, and it may in fact be more dangerous than the Zaire variety, not because of any difference in the symptoms. The symptoms are identical, but because this new virus seems to be harder to contain. Whether this is due to some characteristic of the virus itself or merely dumb luck is uncertain at this time. But the rate at which this outbreak has extended its range is unprecedented. Right now, the question on everybody's mind is whether this virus will spread outside of Africa. Considering the fact that Ebola has a 3-week incubation period, can travel through the air, and has already hitchhiked on an international flight, this is a real possibility. There are some who are downplaying the probability of this outcome, and to be honest, I hope that they're right. But the simple fact of the matter is that these people are basing their assessment on the faulty premise that Ebola is not an airborne virus. Now, the first thing you might be feeling when looking at this situation is a sense of fear and helplessness. While that's a perfectly normal reaction, it's not really helpful. Instead, we should be thinking in terms of practical steps we can take to influence the outcome. One thing we can all do is start confronting journalists and public officials who keep making false statements regarding the way Ebola spreads. In the transcript of this video on SCG News, we will include links to the original study and the BBC's report in 2012. Use these sources and this video to put them in their place. We also need to confront the fact that there isn't a full-out, coordinated international effort to contain this. This is being treated like a sideshow. This crisis has a very real potential of becoming a main event. The doctors on the ground in West Africa don't have enough staff or resources to deal with the situation. It is absolutely inexcusable for the US and the EU to be investing billions of taxpayer dollars into their little power games in Ukraine and Syria, while Ebola is getting a foothold in Africa. This is serious. Call them, write them, heckle them in the streets if you have to, but don't allow them to ignore this issue. Now, whether or not official policy towards the Ebola crisis changes, there are some precautions that you should take right now for yourself and for your family. 1. Know where you would go if you need to leave your home on short notice. If Ebola escapes Africa, the last place you want to be is in a densely populated metropolitan area. It may be that the most practical destination for your family would be a rural area near your current home. But if you're already having concerns about the government that you're living under and how they might handle a crisis like this, then you might want to start looking at some alternatives. Finding an alternative location that suits your family's needs is something that requires a lot of time and research. So don't put this off. The primary characteristics you should be examining in an alternative destination are geography, political environment, climate, population density, and visa terms and requirements. Ideally, you would want to end up somewhere that is geographically isolated to some degree. And this brings us to number 2. If you don't have passports for yourself and each of your dependents, get them now. This is not to say that you should leave the country, but you should have the means to do so. In countries where the Ebola outbreak is underway, it's getting harder and harder to exit. Borders are getting closed down. Flights are getting cut off. This didn't happen right away, but you definitely don't want to be waiting for your passport to show up if Ebola arrives in your city. 3. Know what you would carry with you if you had to leave on short notice. Have those items ready and have the luggage to carry them. It would be wise to consider buying a pack of surgical masks as part of this. Now, if you think about it, these preparations are wise steps to take regardless of whether the Ebola situation deteriorates or not. Knowing where you would go in an emergency and having the means to get there on short notice is important for a wide variety of situations. The civilian population of Iraq, Syria, East Ukraine, and Gaza can attest to that. Whatever you do, don't let fear take control of your mind. Take the steps you can take now, monitor the situation calmly, and be prepared to adapt if necessary. If you want to keep informed about what's going on in the world, go to our website, scgnews.com, and sign up for email updates. Doing so, you'll be notified of any new articles or videos we put out. Also, be sure to subscribe to Storm Clouds Gathering on YouTube and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.